Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to our webinar about generative AI. The focus is on from mass adoption to mass productivity. Important topics, I'm sure you agree. With me today to discuss these topics are none other than our CEO and co-founder, Adam Bujak,
Hello, hello.
and our head of people and culture, Wojciech Zykowiak-Wenzel. Welcome, gentlemen. So before I go into the agenda and explain how we're going to proceed today, let me just say that the Q&A will be held at the end of the session, and there is a panel for you to post questions. So please go ahead and as we go along, post your questions and we'll do our best to answer them. Now on to the agenda. We have divided the webinar today into three sections. The first is to talk about adoption by enterprises and what it means for productivity and many other aspects of it as well, particularly how it might affect the working week. But then the second section is about all these predictions of massive increases in productivity. Will that necessarily happen? And we have some interesting subjects in this section: the solo paradox, FOMO and FOBO. Yes, you heard correctly, FOMO and FOBO. Please stay tuned and you'll hear more about those as well. And finally, we'll move into how to become productivity champions in this world where this figure matters more and more to every enterprise, every organization. How can you make the most of this amazing technology to stay ahead and become a productivity champion that ensures that you get the return on investment, the return on expectations as well? And then we go into the Q&A. First, though, I'll share some data with you just so that you know what's going on in the world. As you can see, this one is really indicative of what is going on. This was a report by Oliver Wyman that was based on a survey of around more than 16,000 employees of different enterprises in 16 countries. And as you can see here on the chart, on average, employees are using generative AI at least once a week, and many of them are using it all day, so significant. So we're talking about 55% on average are already using generative AI. And we've seen this kind of ground up adoption. It so often happens this way that individuals adopt a new technology before enterprises catch on. Another really important thing that this chart shows us is the way that different countries are adopting it. And you can see that India is way ahead at 83%, but the countries on the bottom of the chart, where they have the highest levels of adoption, generally are coming from the big powerhouses of Asia and Latin America, with Europe and North America lagging behind. The only country that sort of met that average figure in Europe is Spain. And this will have a significant impact on the economies of the world as well. So we're likely to see those that are adopting technology early really gaining momentum and getting ahead. And then we also looked at the industries, adoption by industry, and you see there that tech at 75% adoption rate is leading the other industries. Unsurprisingly, financial services is second. That industry always adopts technology really early ahead of others, followed by manufacturing, media, retail, and so on. Basically, every industry is dabbling with the technology, and some are further ahead than others. And then what about the impact? So we've just seen this level of adoption. What about the impact? So this is again also from the Oliver Wyman report. 20 trillion is the expected boost to the global GDP by 2030. Just putting that into perspective, some of the countries in the developed world, in Western Europe, have GDPs of sort of 2 to 4, 5 trillion. So just to show you how massive that figure is, the implication for the world is really significant. And then the other figure, 300 billion hours of work saved globally, with an average of 2 hours per week per person. And then the figure that we are particularly interested in, the productivity figure of 40% increase in developed countries by 2035. So, nobody can really ignore these predictions. We need to get on with it and learn about generative AI and also understand how it's going to change things for us. So let's get on to this. And my next section is about productivity. Adam, what is it? Why do we care so much about productivity?
Well, first of all, let's start with the definition. Productivity is basically correlating the input that you're investing in a given period of time to generate certain output. This definition must be clear, and if you want to improve productivity, you of course have to measure it. Measuring productivity forces you to understand how all elements of your business are working and that together across people, process, and technology dimensions. This is what drives us at KYP to look at the most important metric in relation to the GenAI.
Thank you, Adam. And Wojtek, you with your people and culture hat on, I'm sure, this is right at the heart of your interest and research. How is it going to affect the way that we work, the time that we spend at work?
Yeah, so thank you, Sarah. It's it's a very good question, and I've been thinking about it, especially for the last year, since the massive adoption of GenAI. And I want us to pause for a second and look at this quote. It's a beautiful quote, but it gets even more interesting if you put it in the context of our work. So there's a big difference between spending our time at work and actually using it. Spending means that I'm giving away my time, always like for free. So not necessarily there's outputs. There is inputs, spending time, that's my input. Not necessarily I see a lot of outputs. Now, using my time means that I'm, doing it with purpose and there is some meaningful outputs, right? So this is the big promise. This is the big promise, because I believe that we're on the verge of a big shift with GenAI or AI in general, and that the shift in productivity is going to be not only incremental, it's going to be massive. It means that we're going to fundamentally redefine the way we work, right? So it can be our game changer, and it will help us to move from being just busy to actually doing things that actually matter, to sort of, leveraging our potential. So just to sum it up, I believe that GenAI's promise is that we'll flip the script of, how work is actually being done.
And that is, in line with something that some of the industry figures are predicting. If we take another look at the 40% increase in productivity. Bill Gates, for example, has already quoted a similar kind of figure. He's also talked about the change in working patterns and hours. He's famously said that the 3-day week for humanity is okay. And as somebody who works part-time myself, I can vouch for that. But the big factor, of course, is if you can earn enough of a good living. So that's the big question that we'll need to answer over the years that are to come and as AI develops further. That now brings us to the next section of the webinar, which is about the productivity paradox. So lots has been said about how productivity is going to be up. The 40% figure is massive. If it becomes true, it will be incredible. But does mass adoption of generative AI necessarily mean mass increase in productivity as well? Wojtek, what do you think about this?
Yeah, so let's start with the host and another interesting quote, but I think it's very relevant. Why? Because I believe, and this is like what I'm sort of hearing in a lot of conversation, that there's still a lot of people that are thinking that Gen AI is just another management fad, a hype that will pass to something else, right? And I think as human beings, we're prone to making these inadequate assessments, right? Or we over underestimate the impact of technology And the question is why? And here's why. Because in retrospect, if you look historically at the data, right, it took quite some time for many major tech advancements to scale. A good example is the light bulb. So, after 20 years from its inception, only 3% of US businesses were using it. We're using electricity in general, right? Now, something has definitely changed. If you looked at the data of ChatGPT adoption, because I'm sure this is not a surprise to you, and everyone has been talking about it. That it I think it reached a mass adoption in like what 10 months, I think, right? So the growth pace, and we can call it exponential. So it's really exploded, and I think that by now we're past the tipping point, and that means that things will change, and things will improve faster and faster.
It was unprecedented, wasn't it? The way that
Yeah, absolutely.
ChatGPT
Yeah.
was adopted. But do you think what they're predicting will necessarily happen? Like, will we get more productivity because of generative AI?
Yeah, I mean, this really depends. So I would first, I would start by looking at some historical data and how it correlates with other, technological advancements, right? So, so we had rapid internet connections, we had smartphones, we had cloud computing. But if we look at, productivity data from US economy, we have an example here. What we see is that there was no major, big, massive shift in productivity. And even more importantly, even if there was a shift, it was sort of delayed. So it was not immediate. So the question is why? Why are we witnessing this productivity paradox? Because on one hand, we have those, enormous disruptive technologies. On the other hand, we don't really see an immediate impact on productivity. And the question is why? And I think a part of the answer is because technology itself will not make that big shift happen, at least not immediately, because the question is also, how do we embed that technology into our processes, work processes, and even more importantly, how our people in our organizations will interact and feel about that technology, right? So looking at the people side of things, and this is the acronyms that Sarah has already mentioned earlier. So there's at least two perspectives that we should look at. The first one is FOMO, and let's look at the first one first. So this is something that we're often witnessing at the very top of the organization, right? So this is what our CEOs, what our C-level colleagues, executives are facing. Senior level managers who are taking decision about GenAI adoption. And they are struggling at that. So they feel that GenAI and AI in general is their next big thing, right? So they are pressured. They feel pressured to act. They feel pressured by competitors. They feel pressured by their shareholders, and also pressured intrinsically by their ambition to win and outsmart everyone else in the market, right? So that often pushes them into taking Gen AI or AI adoption decision based on intuition, on emotions, or on half-truths, or simply flying blind into it, right? Because we have this fear of missing out on it, and hence the FOMO. On the other side of the spectrum, if we take a broader view, we seem, at least to some extent, all be a little bit suffering also from the FOBO. So FOBO is a bit, I think, less known phenomenon, and it stands for fear of becoming obsolete, right? So essentially what is happening here is we all understand that there is something big happening, right? And we have this fear of becoming obsolete, maybe replaceable, maybe irrelevant. Why is that happening? Because every single day we're bombarded with news about Gen AI, what is changing, new vendors, emerging capabilities. A good example, I think around 2 weeks ago, we had this news about Sora, right? The new text to video model, right? That has taken social media by storm, right? There's AI gurus everywhere, and that creates tension, anxiety, and feeling of overwhelm. And this is really a serious problem that we have to attend to.
And is there a way to overcome that? I mean, it's understandable, isn't it? It's, you feel you might be left out of this,
I think the obvious answer is, okay, so we need to train our people, we need to reskill, we need to upskill, we need to help them, right? Because probably what we've seen at the Oliver Wyman report data is that, I think, if I recall well, I might be mistaken, but over 90% of our employees, of our people in our organizations, they are using or trying to experiment with GenAI without having any form of training in it, right? So training is obviously obvious, right? But what comes before that is a little bit talking about the vision for GenAI. So what is that? What is that we're trying to achieve? What GenAI can do for us in our organization? What GenAI can do for you as an employee, as a human being, how it can help you. So definitely training, but even before that, creating awareness is super important.
Yes, and we all know it's not perfect, is it? There's some things it does really well and some things it doesn't do so well.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Yeah.
Thank you, Wojtek. So this brings us really to the next section, but let me just quickly summarize what we have said. So we are expecting an increase in productivity, and whether it's will be quite as big as everyone is predicting because of the solo paradox and the challenges of FOMO and FOBO, it might not quite be as high, and there could be diminishing returns on investments in AI. So I'm just going to pose a question to Adam. Adam, you talk about productivity champions, and we know that the way that we approach technology and its adoption makes a big difference. Can you tell us about the concept of productivity champions?
With pleasure. The question that we are asking our customers at KYP is, what if you could replace your intuition with data and facts? Do you want to see the true picture? The true picture on the trifecta of people, processes, and technology. Just to illustrate that, starting with people, not only how to improve their efficiency, but also how to maintain the work-life balance, the right allocation of work. How to ensure that I'm driving enough waste elimination, standardization of the processes, and very hot topic at the moment, process automation. And then TechPulse. This is what we brought to the market last year. We see that every second customer on all continents of KYP has problems with technology preventing people from being productive. Right? You may have poor response time of applications, and we're not counting it in seconds. The record holder waits 26 minutes for the application to respond, believe it or not, right? Is my hardware preventing me from executing faster because I do not have enough memory, or I have a pretty poor CPU? So how to make sure that we are removing the friction from this relationship between input and output we were covering a bit earlier. And when I look at what's happening in the market, there is a tremendous mass productivity increase requirement that forces our customers to understand how all elements of their businesses are working together, right? Not in silos, together, right? And with the advent of GenAI, this challenge is massively amplified. That's why the value proposition of KYP is to enable data acquisition. Remember, there's no AI without data, right? And then AI opportunity identification with KYP it's just like, you're covered by satellite that helps you to oversee the entire model of your organization. But more importantly, you can zoom in to figure out what to do in the individual unit of your organization, individual process, individual function to generate the impact, right? So it's not only about showing the opportunities, all the patterns. This was in the core of our value proposition in the last years, but also how to measure the impact, ensure that what we are inputting in the system generates the output that makes us more competitive, that allows our employees to focus on reskilling, that allows us to, for instance, aim at 3 days working week, as we mentioned in your earlier slides.
And what does it, Adam, mean for jobs? Interesting concepts, but what does it mean for jobs?
Yeah, it's an exciting question, how your job of the future will look like, right? And there's obvious trend that automation is going to continue, right? We started with the Industrial Revolution, right? For white-collar workers, there was the first uptake was with macros on Excel, right? And robotic process automation picked up. So many technologies came into the game, and this is something that will continue to shape our destiny when it comes to executing each individual job. Augmentation is a new phenomenon, right? Previously there were desktop bots, but the question was always, okay, to which extent can this bot operate separately to move towards the automated side? Augmentation will be a big topic. And then there is manual effort, so expertise, knowledge-driven execution, leadership tasks that cannot replace the humans, at least not by now. And our job at KYP is to identify these opportunities, continuously measuring the impact at scale. So this holistic approach makes a big difference and acts as a guidance, as a satellite that shows you in your command center what to execute on and whether you're successful.
Thank you. I guess there's a individual dimension as well. What does it mean for the individual? Wojtek, would you like to take that question?
Yeah, absolutely, Sarah. If you don't mind, I'll speak about my own personal experience with the technology. So I still vividly remember the first week of December 2022 when I started using the then version of 3 something of ChatGPT, and it like blew my mind. And after like almost like year and a half of using it, yeah, I can really feel what this augmentation really means. And for me, it's not only about doing things faster. It's not only about speeding up. It's also about, what happens with that manual time, something that we call here in the chart manual time. And what I discover is that I have more time now for more meaningful things, like for more kind of problem solving, for more creativity, for talking to people, because over the last 12 months or so, I have myself become sort of a prompt engineer, writing job descriptions, creating content for presentations, even writing some of my emails with Microsoft Copilot. So can I do more? Yes. Also that, but even more importantly, I can allocate my time where my skills, I feel, that might be subjective, but I feel that my skills are better used right now. And what it creates, because this is what is important, what is the end game? Like for me as a human being, as an employee, right? It creates, satisfaction, job satisfaction, more fulfillment. And that for me means that my job, thanks to these technologies, has become better. And if I have if my work is better, if my job is better, then ultimately I have a better life. And you can say that I'm biased because come from HR function, so I'm biased, yes. But I want that to happen for everyone. So this is, I think, the vision. This is the great promise of GenAI.
Well, I agree with you, Wojtek. It's it's making my life and work life a lot easier as well. And I'm not from HR. So we've talked about how it's going to change jobs and work, and we've talked about the individuals. Adam, what about the enterprise? What does the future hold for the enterprise?
That's a great question. When you look at productivity-driven organization, this is basically a question, how can I do more with less, right? Or stay constant in my capacity and generate additional output. So the word before GenAI was focusing, as I said earlier, primarily on creating an automation impact. This is what we have been doing, helping to drive automation potential identification, right? We were focusing initially on robotic process automation, then on intelligent content recognition. Now there is any pattern that you can look at with KYP. So whatever technology comes in, we are adding these patterns to the engine to make sure that this identification and quantification of the business case accelerates. The other side of the game is obviously what happens to the manual effort, right? How do I drive efficiency? How do I ensure that my productivity commitments that I made or ambitions that I want to generate are relevant. With GenAI, we see an absolute shift of excitement moving from the automation that continues to scale, right? So I think the maturity on the automation side is growing every day. There's no doubt about that. But GenAI potential identification became one of our daily bread activities that allow us to say, yes, we are the champion in the space, acknowledged by Gartner and other analysts, but more importantly, we are helping this revolution to happen, right? And we are still not neglecting the human factor. I have no doubts that there will be no jobs lost in the near future due to GenAI. On the contrary, you will have prompt engineers, people that deal with all the aspects of introducing this important technology component, but the focus on how to support the human, how to drive us individuals in the organization more efficient while maintaining the work-life balance remains a clear priority. So I would not be worried about the FOBO. What I want to point you to is the other aspect. While you're accelerating on the automation front and GenAI at scale, people will become massively efficient. Well, I was back to the examples that Wojtek shared. You know, being a CEO of a fast-growing company, I receive roughly between 60 and 120 emails a day. Mm-hmm. With Copilot, I'm able to answer all of them. Obviously, 60% is people that want to sell me something, right? So that's an easy one. But I have to rapidly respond to what is happening, and my efficiency went up dramatically. And the question is, what do you do as an organization with this capacity that is being freed up, right? And this opens potential for upskilling. It opens potential for generating more. It opens potential for shortening the working week. It depends on the organizational priorities, right? But the future is absolutely exciting from my perspective, right? And we are incredibly proud and humbled to support large players that you can look up on our website with identification of the patterns and continuous measurement of the impact of what's happening in your organization. Because the change has to be accompanied by the data.
And Adam, there must be a way of measuring what we've achieved, the outcomes.
Absolutely. And you know, this example, Sarah, we are working among other categories also with BPO players, right? They have tremendous productivity commitments. Now, this is a pharma player that started with us in Q3 2022. What we see here on this overview is the entire 2023, so last year, and the impact of data-driven improvement focus. There's 29%, so almost 30% of capacity freed up. Not only have they exceeded their productivity commitment, but more importantly, there's enormous upskilling happening, right? You need to catch up on the new technology. So instead of suffering from the FOBO that Wojtek was describing earlier, you're investing in new capabilities that create competitiveness and can cover other new engagements that you're winning to deliver the outcomes. And this applies for any function, for any sector, for any area that you may dream of, assuming that you have the data, that you interpret it correctly, and then that you execute accordingly. That's the name of the game nowadays.
I like the fact that the augmentation has grown over the months. That's really interesting as well, the level of augmentation. Thank you very much. That really brings us to the end of the talks. We do have a paper that is freely available on our website. The address is there on the the screen, and you can download it by just registering and being able to download it then. It talks about, really, it focuses on the way that KYP.ai is helping deliver better returns on adoption of Microsoft Copilot. It's very interesting, and I encourage you to download the paper. So now we go to the Q&A section of the webinar. Please, if you haven't already posted your questions, do post them. You know, I have a question that I'd like to get everyone started on, and that is about AI myths. So much is being published, and perhaps not always, but people who are, you know, particularly experienced in AI. Could there be a problem with myths and really mumbo jumbo almost being generated and scaring people off?
Yeah,
Yeah.
if I may, you know, because I think we already discussed that and covered that. So I don't want to repeat what I already said, but I think, yes, we're facing this enormous noise, and the advice and my answer would be, okay, show me the data. Show me the data, and this is what we're ultimately trying to do with our customers. So show me the data where I can apply this technology, right? And also when I apply it, okay, it's not just a promise that things will change. Measure what is changing and show it to the people. Show how the things are changing. So this is, and this is, by the way, not a, you know, one-off exercise. It's a continuous improvement process, right? Just with the, you know, with the new amazing technology. So that would be my answer. Based your action on data.
Very good point. Thank you. Another question, it's about KYP. The question is, how does KYP help other enterprises using Productivity 360 product? Adam, would you like to take that one?
With pleasure, absolutely. So, you know, there is a wide spectrum of our value proposition that ranges from GenAI opportunity identification, RPA candidates, measurements of work-life balance on the people side, assessing process compliance or technology. But the most important aspect here is the objective that you should have in mind when it comes to AI. There's lots of aspects that we see, starting creation of the COEs, definition of the data lake. Data officers nowadays gain tremendous traction, and their role becomes even more important, right? It started a while ago with the move to the cloud, where we were facing the promise of, okay, once you move your applications to the cloud, the insights will be there, right? It didn't happen. That's why technologies like KYP are appearing on the horizon to close that gap, help you to automatically gather, acquire the data, generate insights, and then execute accordingly while measuring it. So for us, the priority is to support the mission of productivity increase. And as we see, wherever you go, it's an ongoing battle of every corporation, every individual. We have to remain competitive, generate more with less, and most importantly, take advantage of the technologies that are in the market, looking at the adoption. Right? There is another question on the adoption that I see here. This is one of the aspects that are absolutely relevant for the latest technologies like Microsoft 365 Copilot or Google's Gemini. What we see is that it's not enough to acquire the first 50 licenses and say, okay, let me see what happens, right? This is what we call lavish experimenters do. It's about identifying, first of all, who in my organization, looking at the end-to-end execution, is using enough, for instance, of the MS Office to apply MS 365 Copilot, right? If you're just spending 3% on Outlook and Excel, it's probably not for you, right? But The good news for Microsoft is we sometimes have customers that approach us from the finance department. Latest case in Singapore, where the customer said, we are an SAP shop. We measured and we show that actually SAP constitutes only 7% of time spent across the entire finance department, covering 55 countries. So it's not a small organization. It's just 7% of time. The rest happens in other applications. And more than 70% is spent in Excel, Outlook, Teams. It may sound familiar to some of you, right? So there we try to elevate the potential and say, okay, if you have such ratio, this is where you look at, and then you have to identify very clearly the objective. If I want to operationalize, aspects like how do I faster answer my emails? That's my specific case, right? How do I take better advantage from summarization of the course? It works incredibly well, whether you're on MS 365 Copilot or Google's Gemini. But the most important aspect is to see the entirety. Is it going to change my destiny, and which of my employees are going to benefit from it? And that's why we will be launching Microsoft Copilot Impact Score. We start with Microsoft. We then publish the version for Google, where you will be able to see what is my potential. Do I know my potential before I take a decision to spend millions on enabling my employees? So we prefer focused executors that drive it with the ambition to change the destiny of their organizations, and more importantly, to generate more impact.
Very interesting. Thank you. There's also the ability to achieve the return on expectations as well. Those expectations are very high, aren't they? And KYP can help with that. There's actually a question about that.
Yes, and this is something that is the most difficult aspect to define, right? With every project that we are starting, the rollouts usually define, okay, first of all, what is the business case? But more importantly, what is the soft impact that you're going to generate, right? Will you sleep better? Because you have data, you have the insights that allow you to take a decision between A and B, right? That's, by the way, one of the most quoted values. But what does it mean for the employees? What does it mean for the relationship, leader versus employee, right? Can I look at the data and take an education decision on the performance evaluation, on the potential, how to remove these mundane activities, but not dying the death of, automating every little deviation in the process and screaming around because the RPA bot again failed to execute yet another exception. It's about educated way of taking decisions where to deploy technology and how to support the outcome and the people in the journey of excellence that we are propagating and supporting around the globe.
Thank you, Adam. Wojciech, anything to add?
No, I think I agree, with everything that Adam said, and my one sentence summary would be that, intuition is good because we're and always be human beings, but data is better.
Sure. And I guess there's this other dimension to it, which is with KYP. We talked about FOBO and educating people and training them, and the lack of education. With KYP, you can actually identify where more training is needed as well. Isn't that true? By the way that, work is conducted. So it can help with that aspect.
Absolutely. And, this is speed to value is one of the critical factors, right? We see that, with the past in Corona, there's lots of changes that are happening. Some companies have not yet decided how do they drive, for instance, the hybrid office. Shall I spend 3 days in the office and 2 at home, vice versa? How to drive that? So this is one aspect. Now, with the new employees, new joiners, and we feel it at KYP as well, that are not necessarily living in where the office is, right? So you have remote workforce per se. This becomes even more important. We're able to show you how the compliance of execution looks like, how the work is getting done, and more importantly, help accelerate the journey. There are dedicated platforms, by the way, where we are also assessing the potential for. So when you are adding enormous amount of new employees, there is dedicated technologies that help you to train them, especially in the white collar workforce space. We help to predict the impact, see whether you're doing the right things, right? And then measure the productivity, as I said earlier, right? Because ultimately the outcome matters.
Thank you. I think that's all we have time for. Thank you very much, Adam and Wojtek, for joining me today. And thank you to all the delegates for joining us as well. And don't forget to download the paper that I mentioned earlier. And I hope you'll join us again for another one of our webinars very soon. See you soon. Goodbye.
Goodbye. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Sarah. Take care.